Hello, everybody. You are listening to Judging Meghan with your host, Meghan Judge. I'm going to start with the following. It is finally sunny in California where I live. And I have been I really believe, and we'll talk about this in a minute because we're going to talk about happiness and life. And I'm really excited to introduce Dr. Elia to you. But I get really down in the dumps when it's not sunny. And I moved to California for the sun. I mean, that's why most people pay the astronomical amounts to live here. And that we used to always have June gloom, but we had really bad May fog and all this stuff. Yes, it's I think global warming, all the things that are going on with our world, and the climate is changing, but it's just nice to finally have the sunshine out. So I want to start with that. My second thing that I want to say is, and this is I hope this is funny to you if you've ever done this, but I'm on Instagram a lot, so you can find me at Judging Meghan if you want to follow me and you're a listener. But sometimes when I go into the app, something will pop up and I automatically end up in somebody's live Instagram chat. And it's so embarrassing. I don't know if this has ever happened to you, Dr. Elia, but it's so embarrassing because you're like, I didn't mean to get into this live chat right now, but I also don't want to stay. And I also feel like a weirdo because I'm always like the first person. So you're the first person that pops up because you think it's something else that's alerting you. Has this ever happened to you? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I know what you're talking about, but as soon as I go in, I go out immediately.
I know that, but they see you. So sometimes I don't really do lives anymore, but it's always kind of like this Instagram etiquette where you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed. Like, that I'm the first one into the live, like, this weirdo just like sitting there like, hey, when's it starting, everyone? Or
the funny thing is that I'm Greek. I don't get embarrassed about anything. So I'm on the other side of the scale.
I love that you're Greek. I'm going to go next summer. I cannot wait. So we're going to have to talk about that. Everyone, I am so excited.
Before you go to Greece, you got to talk to me because I will send you all the non-touristy stuff. I will tell you exactly where you need to go to have a very authentic experience in Greece.
Okay,
so,
I'm actually, you're stuck with me because don't worry, I'm going to be bugging you because my husband and I have never been. We're going to take our kids hopefully next summer. It's on my bucket list. I've always wanted to go to Greece. We've all been put here for a reason and we all deserve acceptance.
Judging Meghan with Meghan Judge.
I'm a trauma survivor from a really young age, and I have been diagnosed with complex PTSD in the past few years. I've been surrounded by death and abuse much of my life. I've been dragged through the mud and have been to the point of not wanting to go on anymore. Through my interviews with other survivors, I've learned that there is a way out. From recovering to surviving and thriving, we all have the strength to come out the other side.
You are listening to Judging Meghan.
Let me introduce you because we're just sitting here chatting and I haven't introduced you yet. So Dr. Elia Gourgouris is a coach, author, and speaker on happiness, positive leadership, and well-being. Over the last 25 years, he has helped thousands of people achieve happiness and fulfillment, both in their professional and personal relationships through his coaching and keynotes. I am so honored to have you on. I am so excited for my readers to hear about your book, The 7 Paths to Lasting Happiness. Welcome to the podcast. Can I call you Dr. Elia, by the way?
You can.
Okay.
You can.
I like the nautical look on you today, the stripe.
You know what? Because my wife and I just came back from France last Sunday, and everybody in France wore these so we went all French.
Yeah,
we just decided totally French. Yeah, we had the best time.
Were you in the south of France?
Were
you in the south of France? What part of France?
We spent like 8 days in Paris, and then we went actually more towards the north. We've done the south of France before, but we went north, and just had a magical 3 weeks. It was awesome.
I love France. I prefer Italy, and I have a feeling I'm going to love Greece, like we just talked about. So I am just so excited to have you on today, and I feel like just listening to what your thoughts are on happiness. I think a lot of my listeners come to the podcast because they might be struggling with depression. My biggest platform for listeners that I talk a lot about is suicide prevention. That's my passion, is helping other people, helping moms, dads, whoever comes to the podcast deal with the stressors of life. So when I started this podcast, it was really because I was at the lowest point of my life in 2020, and then add COVID and all the things. And I just find that so many of my listeners have such a hard time with finding happiness. So I'm really grateful to you that you wrote this book. I know you've helped a lot of people, and just to like pick your brain on things that, easy things that people can do, reading your book, but also just to make their lives a little bit more fulfilling. So let me start with, tell me about where you're from. Let's start there. I know you said you're Greek, so tell me about a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, born in Athens, Greece, so I'm a true Athenian. My heritage goes back thousands of years. My family moved to Santa Monica in Southern California, so that's where I grew up. I grew up in Southern California, and from middle school all the way through PhD, I went to UCLA. And that's when I started my private practice as a clinical psychologist, and then we moved to Boulder, Colorado, or near Boulder. Which, by the way, did you know that Colorado has more sunshine than Miami and Los Angeles? Denver does.
I'm not surprised.
So,
I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of Colorado. I love it. It's beautiful. I don't love I always get kind of sick from the elevation when I go, but I think you just get used to it.
You don't get used to it, actually. I mean, yeah, if you lived here, but, if you go from sea level and you fly into Denver, you're probably going to have a headache for the first day or two. That's pretty normal. Where are you in Are you in Southern California or North?
I am. So right now, I'm in the Manhattan Beach area. I don't know.
Oh my gosh, love Manhattan Beach.
Yeah. So you're from Santa Monica, so you understand the June gloom that I was talking about in the beginning. I
do. You know what? And I come out. I have family in Santa Monica still. I come out four or 5 times a year. So we have to get together outside of this too. I would love to come to Manhattan Beach, meet your husband, and tell you all about Greece.
Oh, I would love it. We'll make a date once we finish talking, where we can talk about all of that. So tell me, so you got into the field. My husband also went to UCLA. Go Bruins. Tell me,
let's go Bruins. Yes.
Tell me a little bit about. I'm always fascinated by people that go into the field of mental health. Was there a reason behind it? I mean, there's always,
yes. In some ways, there's a certain energy that I have, which is God given. I believe I was born with that energy. Even going back to middle school, and I was kind of like painfully shy as a kid when we moved to the United States. I was like, left my home in Greece and new country, big country, and so on. But even as far back as middle school and high school, boys and girls, or young men and young women, would actually come and tell me all their secrets. I didn't even know you could make money doing that, like being a psychologist. They just felt safe with me, and that's something that I have. People open up to me and tell me all kinds of things immediately. So I got my PhD. I started my private practice. I did it for 18 years. So what I found out, and I got burned out eventually, but what I found out when I retired was that most psychologists, if they last 10 years, that's about the average. And if they see 20, maybe to 25 patient hours per week, that's considered full time. Well, Meghan, I did it for 18 years, and I would see 45 people per week. I'm talking about morning, noon, and night. Like, I worked like a maniac. My wife is like, honey, you're going to have a heart attack. And I'm like, no, I can handle it. Kind of arrogant, actually. And I did handle it for 16 years until my body started breaking down. And at some point, I suffered from serious burnout. It almost cost me my life. So I exited after 18 years, which was not an easy exit, by the way, to change your life. But I needed to do that in order to... And then I went into executive coaching and leadership training and development, like much, much easier than that being in therapy. And I'm a positive psychologist for me is at the core of who I am. And the happiness, like I was born happy, which was one of those weird things. Like my happiness actually started the day I was born. This is no joke. This is no joke. The day this is in Greece. This is back in the old days because I'm pretty old. My dad was kind of like a tough Greek guy, drinking whiskey and smoking and all that stuff. So, he comes up to, back in the day, you couldn't go into the birthing room, but just the surgeon, and my mom, there was no like Instagram, there was no videos, there's nothing. There was nothing back then, right? So he comes up to this nurse, and I'm behind this little window with four or five other little babies, and we're all wrapped in the same generic white blanket back in the day. He goes, "Which one's my son?" And I guess at that point I had a smile on my face. So the nurse turns to my dad and says, "Your son, he's the happy one." And I was branded as the happy one. So now I'm growing up in my family, and the story gets told, right? Well, you came out of the womb happy. You're the happy one. And I've kind of lived into that. Now, Meghan, fast forward 25 years. Now I'm in graduate school, and one of the professors is teaching us about nature versus nurture. Like, how are we made? Is it our genetic predisposition or the environment? And of course, it's both. So I had this terrible thought. I'm like, wait a minute. What if my dad shows up late? Let's say he gets caught in traffic, shows up at the same hospital, talks to the same nurse, asks the same question. And at that point, maybe I have like gas pains and I'm screaming my head off and my face is red. And the nurse turns to my dad and says, "Your son, he's the cranky one." And now the story that I'm told growing up in my home is like, "Well, you came out of the womb cranky, you miserable little beep." Because everyone's been branded.
Yeah.
We have all had a brand when we were first. It's typically early on in our development, probably in our homes. And there are some brands that are beautiful. Obviously, the happiness brand is the best. But there are other ones. The creative one, the princess, the beautiful one, the smart one, the athletic one, the loving one, the kind one. These are wonderful brands. And if you've been blessed to have one of those brands, like literally count your blessings. But in my experience in working with thousands of people, I would say 70 to 75% of women in private practice and coaching, some of those brands are horrific.
Mm-hmm.
And I will tell you the three most common ones, and you might be like, well, who would brand their kid that way? But believe me, this is what my patients and my people that I've talked to, you know what the top three brands, negative brands are? The ugly one, the stupid one, and the fat one. And you might say to yourself, who would say that? But trust me. So the fast forward to my book comes out, and I'm at a women's conference in North Carolina, 500 women and me. And I'm sharing this story with the audience and sharing, listen, if you love your brand, count your blessings. But if you don't like your brand, as an adult now, you have the power to choose for yourself what kind of brand you want to have for the rest of your life.
I love
to empower the audience, basically.
I love that.
No, but because you don't have to stay stuck
let me just
with
go
our
back
brand.
really quickly and ask you something, because I want to touch on this. So working as a psychologist, psychiatrist, seeing that many patients, 45 a week, I mean, that's a tremendous load.
Insane. I know, it's insane. I know.
But what I wonder, because I mean, I only do that. I record usually once to twice a week. I take on people's problems, sometimes just doing this, not their problems, but like if somebody tells me a story and it's really sad, it takes me a while to get it out of my head, and I'll like obsess with it about it a little bit. So I'm wondering if that's kind of what, because if you're somebody that's like born happy, and it's almost like the Pollyanna effect, if you will. So when we're little, when we're kids, this is just my opinion. I was a very happy kid until I was like, went into probably middle school. Actually, I take that back. My sister passed away and I witnessed it. So it really traumatized me at the age of 2. But, I was always kind of like very friendly. I wanted to have lots of friends and be nice. And then I kind of went through this brief period of bullying, like a lot of kids do. And
of course.
And then it like stuck with me and it changed me. And so I wonder, because that lasting impression from childhood, really molds you into the person you turn into as an adult. So when you talk about seeing all these patients and how you grew up, like, from the minute you came into the world where you were laughing, and it kind of like our spirit is kind of like torn down, even though your intention, I'm sure, going into psychology was to help people and help them solve their problems. But to see that many people, of course, that's going to burn you out. So can you kind of just like touch on that a little bit more? Because I would love to know that.
Yeah, after I graduated from UCLA, I didn't go into graduate school right away, even though my undergraduate was in psychology, because I had this thought, it's like exactly what you're talking about. what if I become a psychologist and I get depressed by hearing all these people's stories, all these depressing stories? So there was a gap, maybe 3 or 4 years before I went back to graduate school. But, I've always been motivated by making a difference in this world. It's never money. It's always been, I want to leave this world a better place than I found it. So that's how, so initially, yes, I'm happy-go-lucky on the surface. I'm thriving. I have this amazing practice, all word of mouth, never marketed anything, people on a wait list. And for 16 years, Meghan, I was doing so good. I was crushing it. And I felt like I couldn't say no to people. Because a lot of people would come to me and say, Dr. Elia, you're our last hope. We've been to counseling, we've been to this, we've been to that. It's you, or else we're getting a divorce, or it's you, or else I'm going to commit suicide. I mean, there was a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
So I didn't feel like I could say no, so I would take in more and more people. Well, at some point, my body started breaking down. And I was disconnected from my body, unfortunately. And I wasn't living like skipping breakfast and lunch, working like a maniac, having dinner, and just things like wife, kids, and so on, going to sleep and over again. But on the surface, it appeared like I was doing fine. So at some point when your body breaks down and when you're in enough physical pain, and you will appreciate this, whether it's physical, emotional, mental, or spiritual pain, at some point it brings you to your knees, no matter who you are, including myself. So it literally, after 6 months of this, because I was like, and my pain was not psychosomatic, it was real pain. I finally got to my knees and I prayed. I'm like, God, why is this happening to me? I'm trying to be a good person. And the answer came crystal clear. I'm trying to take you in a different direction and you're not listening to me.
Yeah.
What's the unfortunate thing is, you know what I did with that great advice? And whatever to me, it could be the Spirit of God, the Holy Ghost, the Holy Spirit, your intuition, your higher self, whatever you call that voice. It's, to me, I've been listening to it for 35 years and it's powerful and crystal clear. And my messages are always short. But unfortunately, you know what I did with that message? I ignored it. It was a big mistake. I ignored it because I was into my ego, which was like, well, I'm the doctor. I got this practice. I'm making tons of money. I'm making a difference. So that message, I'm trying to take in a different direction. I just ignored it. What happens when you ignore your intuition or your higher self or that, the voice is, does your life get better or worse if you ignore it?
You're obviously worse. Yeah.
I know. And obviously worse. So 6 more months go by. Now the frequency of pain and so on has become almost daily. Mm-hmm. And it's really impacting me. Like now I'm really suffering. And I'm in and out of hospitals. They can't figure out what's wrong with me. They're doing all kinds of testing. So now I'm a year into my pain. I'm back on my knees again. I'm like, okay, now I'm ready to listen. Like, why is this happening to me? Like, I'm like, the same question is like, I told you, I'm trying to take you in a different direction. You're not listening to me. I want you to spread the light to a lot more people, end quote. My first thought was like, well, how do I make money doing that? I still have a family to provide for. What does that even mean? I don't even know what does that mean? Like, and the final statement was 3 sentences. The final one, and if you don't listen to me, I'm calling you home by the time you're 50. That number is significant because my mother died of cancer when she was 51. So for me, that was a shocker to me. That was like somebody took a 2x4 and hit me over the head. So actually, when I got that message, I went upstairs. I talked to my wife. I'm like, honey, I think I need to shut down my practice. I can't do it anymore. But it's not easy to shut down a full practice. Like legally even, I had to hire an attorney. There was a process that I have to go because you don't want to abandon your patients and have somebody commit suicide and then people will come after you. So I had to and it took me 9 months to shut it down. I'm like, December 31st, I'm done. This was March. So I'm not taking any more new referrals. I'm trying to work through my patients to, get them to a certain point so they can exit my practice. Unfortunately, what happened is my body was suffering so much that even though I started even taking Fridays off as self-care days for the first time in my life, it was too late. And that by October, I'm literally 45 days away from retiring, I hit the wall physically. And I won't bore you with the details, but a couple of 6 days in the hospital, 2 surgeries, this close to exiting, very painful on all kinds of levels. I pulled my surgeon afterwards. I said, listen, I need to learn this lesson. I never want this to happen to me again. Why did this happen to me? He goes, easy, either excessive drinking, and I didn't drink at all, no alcohol, or excessive stress. So what had happened for what you said, 18 years, tens of thousands of hours, all the abuse, just all the stuff that people I heard was stored into my body and was starting to eat me from the inside, like literally was eating me from the inside, my God. So I'm now chronologically, I'm 20 years older than I was back then, and I'm healthier, happier, physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, because I made some major adjustments. My body took 6 months to recover post-surgery. And I'm like, this was so painful to me. Like, I will never be in this place again. I will never get burned out from doing my work. I will never neglect my self-care. And I'm living proof. And that's when I wanted to do the other stuff professionally. And I wrote the book in 2015, 7 Paths to Lasting Happiness. And much to my amazement, it became a #1 bestseller, been translated into 4 or 5 languages, and has helped hundreds of thousands of people. But you know what? I wrote that book from my heart, not as a PhD, just like I'm talking to you right now. And people, you get comments and reviews on Amazon and so on. A lot of it, like, Elia, it's not like you said something that Aristotle didn't say about happiness 2,500 years ago. But what we love about your book or your books is that at the end of each chapter, you're like, okay, couple of questions for the reader to ponder, to think about, and then take action. So we're going to talk about forgiveness and gratitude and self-care. It's the take action that has made the difference, and that's what people have liked about the books, and that's what resonated.
Okay, let me just stop you, because I'm fascinated by so much of what you say. Number 1, spirituality, huge in my own life. Throughout my life, I've strayed. I lost my dad at he was 46, so I can relate to you on so many levels.
Oh, you can relate to that. How old were you?
I was 13. So like just being in that age group now of being constantly paranoid about, like, what's that? Am I, like, every time I have to have like the whole ultrasound, I'm constantly, but like you, I was in corporate America in sales, in very high stress sales for many, many years. And my body got to a point, and then I had this horrific, I hate even talking about it because it still comes into my life and still affects me, but just like this perfect storm of 2020 where all of my childhood trauma just welled up, and I had this really horrible friend breakup. I'm still dealing with it now, like mean girl moms, which, be happy you're a man. Because women can be so horrifically awful. But what it did to me was it, like, the combination of like high stress work, friend breakup, trauma from my childhood, diagnosis of complex PTSD, motherhood, the stress of young kids, being a wife.
That is a perfect storm.
It was a perfect storm, truly, truly. And I started having debilitating panic attacks. Like where I thought I was waking up at night and dying. And I said to my husband, I was like, I can no longer do this anymore. I know in my heart, and my therapist at the time was like, you need to make a change. And that's how I kind of got into what I'm doing now. But I will tell you, like, it's hard. It was hard for me too to leave a high, like, I had a 401k, I had a pension, I had, a high paying sales job, all of these things, just to like shut it down. And then go to like my higher power, which I believe in God, and go like, I need to do something with my life to give back. Like, I know that that's what I'm supposed to do. I'm by no means perfect. I am a big, giant pain in the rear end. Ask my husband. But I think it's so important. And I do talk a lot about like purpose-driven lives. I think it's important because the most happiness that I get in my life, Dr. Elia, is talking to people like you once a week or twice a week if I'm recording twice in a week. Because people like you make such a tremendous difference in this world. And I think with all of the problems that we have going on in our world right now, if more of us just like checked in to say, like, how can we help somebody else in a day, it would just like help our pain, like our sadness, whatever we're dealing with. So I just wanted to say that to you because I think what you did was like extremely brave, and it takes a strong person. A lot of times men, especially, they're the breadwinners. they have all this pressure on them not to show emotion, not to break, not to, like they can't leave their careers, and then it causes burnout. So I know that was a big, like long-winded statement, but can you give me some thoughts on that?
I mean, it wasn't easy. That's why when I said I ignored it for 6 more months, is because I wasn't ready to switch careers, and I wasn't ready to give up the money, or I wasn't ready to give up the doctor or whatever. And I was forced to do it. I wish I had a better story to tell. Yeah, the minute I heard the message, I was like, yep, let's do it. No, it wasn't like that. I had to pay a huge price for it, but I'm so grateful for it. I really am so grateful. The greatest lessons that I've ever learned from life, Meghan, I believe that we're all graduates from the University of Adversity, all of us. And the older we get, the more adversity we have, because we've lived on this planet longer, right? So we know that gratitude, having an attitude of gratitude, you cannot be in a grateful state and be physiologically depressed. That's impossible, physiologically speaking. But can we be grateful when we're in the midst of adversity? To me, that's a much bigger, because it's easy to be grateful when things are going well. That's the easiest thing in the world. That's a piece of cake. How about when we're struggling? How about when we're in a crisis or a challenge? Can we still be grateful? And I'm here to tell you the answer is a definitive yes. And, one of my role models is I love Nelson Mandela, his life and how he lived, and how he said something so profound. He said, in life, either we win or we learn. In other words, as long as we're learning something, there's no losing in life. So the greatest lessons that I've ever learned have come from what at the time appeared to be human frailties, weaknesses, mistakes, setbacks, however you want to call it. It's out of those times that I've had the greatest lessons in my life, including the burnout that I suffered, 20 years ago.
Tell me about, let's start with gratitude, because that's a perfect thing to start with. So if you're like in a miserable place, right? And you're like, I joke all the time that in 2020, I was like in a corner in my house. Then COVID happened and I was drooling in a corner. But how do you get yourself out of that space and find gratitude? I know that's a big question, but for somebody
it's a wonderful question. I will tell you this: in the middle of the pandemic, since you brought it up, I got a download, again, one of those downloads, on March 15th was of 2020. So this is early on in the pandemic. And the download, I was sitting right here, like in front of which was, Elia, you need to write a book about the pandemic, because there's a mental health crisis tsunami that's going to sweep the world, and people are going to need your help. And by the way, you need to get the book out in 45 days, which I'm like, that's absurd. My first book took 4 years to write. How am I going to get a book in 45 days? But I called my partner and I said, listen, this is what I got, and I'm going to start writing tomorrow morning. I need your help. I can't do it by myself. Can you help me? Are you in or are you out? He said, I'm in. And I kid you not, for 45 days, we did nothing else but write this book, morning, noon, and night, which is the 7 keys to navigating a crisis, how to emotionally deal with pandemics and other disasters, which was the first book to market in the world about the pandemic in May of 2020. This is way early on. One of the things that we discovered in terms of people facing challenges in life, but crises come and go, challenges are ongoing, is that human beings fall into 4 different categories in the way that they handle crisis or challenges, and or 4 different personality types, however you want to say it. The first one is the victim. And the victim mentality is, why is this happening to me? Poor me. As if it's only happening to me, not 8 billion other people. That's number one. The second one is the critic. And the critic will criticize whether it's the World Health Organization, the government, the president, their boss, their spouse, their kids. They're always criticizing, blaming, angry, frustrated, and that's their MO. That's how they deal with things. And deal is in quotes. So that's number 2. The third one is what we like to call almost like the bystander, somebody who's off to the side, who is so overwhelmed by the changes that are taking place in our society or in their lives that they're basically the deer with the headlights look, that they're frozen in fear. They don't do anything. And what all 3 of these personality types have in common is this: none of them move the needle forward to some positive resolution. Either it's poor me, I get mad, or I'm just fearful and frozen. Now we have the 4th personality type, which is the navigator, which was the whole purpose of the book. And navigators do certain things consistently and they successfully navigate through life. And gratitude is one of the things that they have very well. But before we go on how to successfully navigate through life's challenges, it is important to tell you this. It's not like, well, Meghan and Dr. Elia were navigators and the rest of you are like losers. It's not like that. All human beings have all four of those personality types within themselves. They exist within each human being. So the key is, if I'm going to feel like a victim, do it for half an hour, get it out of your system, and then pivot and move into navigation mode. It's okay to get mad from time to time. And sometimes, there are legitimate reasons why you're. But if I'm mad for 6 months or 6 years towards the government or whatever, who am I hurting? Them or me? Right here. And the deer with the headlights, look, it happens from time to time. People get scared, things happen, but you don't want to stay frozen in fear. You want to move into action, right? And that's what navigators do very well. They listen to the spirit, they practice massive self-care, and they do express gratitude, and they look for the lessons. So gratitude, I know that they're saying have an attitude of gratitude. It's catchy, it rhymes, and it's cute. It's easy to do when things are going well. To me, I'm focused more, how about when we're challenged? And that's when I go back to Nelson Mandela. Rather than saying, why is this happening to me? Why is this happening for me? That's a whole different outcome. When you start thinking, why is this happening for me? Then you're like, okay, that's when the lesson comes. And once the lesson comes and you implement it in your life, you can be grateful for that. You can be grateful for the challenge. I'm thankful for the challenges. I'm not thankful for the pain. But I am thankful for what I went through because it made me who I am today.
I love what you said. I talk about my dad often, like not all the time. I'm actually currently in therapy and I'm trying to work out. I blocked a lot of my dad out because I lost him so early. But he was diagnosed with cancer, and suffered for 9 months of his life. And he was a really, really good human, like tremendously kind, always a orthodontist, treated like the nuns and priests at Georgetown at no charge. I'm not like exactly like my dad, but the good parts of me, I believe, are just like my dad. I inherited that piece, which I'm grateful for. So the good parts of me, I know I got from him. But he used to say when he got sick, he said, I've been given, and he was young, obviously, when he passed, but he said,
so young. I know, so young.
And he said, I never questioned, this makes me emotional still, why, like, I had all these great gifts in life, like, like affluence, like a happy family, like, grew up like pretty well, like all the things. Why would I question God when I'm struck down ill? And I probably am not going to be here very much longer. And I kind of like, for somebody like you realize now in life, like 46 is still pretty young, just to be so self-aware of something like that and say, because most people, when, you're sick, you can't understand, like it's the victim attitude, like you talked about, like, why is this happening to me? But what you said really struck me because it is something like, the hardest things in life are also like the strangest gifts. And I'll say that because I truly believe it's true. I touched on that friend breakup. If I wouldn't have gone through that breakup of those women and like how awful they were to me, I wouldn't like have the friendships I have now. And I wouldn't even have a podcast. I wouldn't be doing any of the things I'm doing to try and improve myself as a human. So maybe a part of me is like grateful for that, even though it's still tremendously painful and they're still doing mean things all these years later. But that kind of like goes into the next question, which is, so we have the gratitude piece and all of that makes sense. But what about the forgiveness piece?
So it's funny you should say that because the first is self-love and self-care is number one. Gratitude is number two, the second path. But the third one is forgiveness. And my experience, Meghan, in working with, I work with a lot of addicts too, by the way, in my private practice. And addicts, of course, because of their addictions, they hurt a lot of people, right? When they would come into therapy with me and they would sober up and so on, and we would have a plan of action and we'd go through, first year of sobriety and so on. At the end of that, I would have sort of an exit interview, if you will. Like, let's call it an exit interview, which would be the following. Do you feel like your spouse has forgiven you? Yes. Or even God, whatever. I mean, your kids, yes. Your boss, yes. Anybody else they had offended. Then it would be the last question. Have you forgiven yourself? You know what the best answer I ever got from that? Not the best answer was, I'm working on it. That was the best answer when it came to self-forgiveness. But the most typical answer was, no, I have not. Because people are so hard on themselves. So forgiveness doesn't come easy to them. And I have a whole process that I take people through, how to forgive yourself and how to forgive others. And it's relatively, I think it's simple, honestly. And this comes from somebody, Meghan, who my wife was like, how do you do that? Like, I don't have anything left to forgive myself for. It's a clean slate. And I forgive myself fairly easy when I make a mistake or whatever. Like, you know what? I don't take myself too seriously. Even though this is a serious topic and forgiveness is huge, I think when I take my clients through the forgiveness process and they leave my office, they say, I feel like 1,000 pounds has been lifted off of me. I should have done this sooner in my life. But a lot of people just don't know how to forgive themselves. I think that's part of it. They're not sure.
I think that forgiveness is really difficult, though. I mean, I'm stuck on that. I really am. I have a huge piece. I'm just using myself because I love to talk about myself. I have a huge block on where I'm working through so much anger. And so I think there's so many people walking through the earth right now that are stuck on the anger piece. Am I correct on that?
Absolutely. But anger is so detrimental to our health. Anger is an emotion, it's good, but you want to move it through. You don't want to be stuck in anger. Like, remember, like the critic that we talked about, because that will rob you from your happiness and your wellness and most likely your health too. So
what do you tell people about getting through the anger piece? Like some advice on that.
Can I take you through the forgiveness process, though?
Course,
seriously,
please.
like hands-on, like this is how you do it. This is how you do it. And let's talk specifically about self-forgiveness first, because I think that's more important. When we do the self-forgiveness and we pass that, then we can talk about other people. Here's what I tell my clients to do. Write down a list of all the things you have not forgiven yourself about. It could be 10 things, 20 things, 100 things, 5 things, whatever. A whole list, like bullet points. When you're done with that, I want you to give a number next to each one of them from a scale of 1 through 10. 10 is, I murdered somebody. Like, I actually committed murder. Like, I killed another human being. And 1 is, I spilled milk on myself at the restaurant. It was really embarrassing. I was just so embarrassed. So, and then put them in an order and let us begin. And with most people, we begin with the low-hanging fruit, the 1s, the 2s, and the 3s, which are easier, right? And then we gain some momentum, they gain some practice at self-forgiveness, and then we move on to the more serious, like the 4s, 5s, and 6s, and eventually the higher-ups. What I discovered, however, is this is specifically about alpha males. It's very unique. Because I work with a lot of senior leaders, C-suite and so on, and I've taken through this process. Their thing is like, no, that's not how I want to do it. I'm like, well, how do you want to do it? I want to start with my 9s and my 8s and my 10s. And I'm like, why would you do it that way? Because if I can forgive myself in the higher stuff, everything else after below that is easier. Frankly, I don't care which way people go as long as they do the process. Most people start with a low hanging fruit, like I said. But if you want to start with the top and go down the other direction, it doesn't matter to me as long as you do it. And that's the process. And one by one, you start crossing things off your list, the low hanging fruit, the medium stuff, and then towards the end, the heavier stuff, perhaps. That's the process. And it works. Sometimes it takes 2 or 3 hours in my office, and then we burn that piece of paper. We have a ceremony, we light it up, and we burn it. It goes up to the sky. It's almost like this major release, and you're done.
Do you think that people that do that, I love the idea of burning the list.
Yeah, in the end, yeah, you want to get rid of it. Yes.
How long do you think? I mean, I know everybody must be different, but do you have people that can get through this process quicker than others?
I'm telling it sometimes it lasts a few hours. I mean, sometimes like when I do that, I have open ended the rest of the day. It's like if it's 2-3 hours, however long it takes, and we process through it. Some people do it faster. Some people do it longer. There's no right or wrong. It's like however long it takes. We'll do it until it's done. But there's nothing left on the list when we're done. Nothing.
So you're saying that
and it's emotional. It's emotional. People cry. It's not. I'm not saying it's easy, but what I care about is the outcome. And when we give a long hug at the door and they leave, I'm like, man, I feel so like literally 1,000 pounds. I feel like the only thing they always say is like, I wish I had done that sooner, or I wish I had known how to do this sooner. That's the only thing they say. Is it emotionally draining? Of course. It needs to be. But that's not the end of the world. They recover. And then I get the text the next day. It's like, I woke up this morning and I feel like this is the best day of my life. I can't wait to go because I feel so light. The heaviness that I've been carrying with me sometimes for decades, I might add. There are things that people have not forgiven themselves for that happened 50 years ago. I know somebody who actually told me, I said, when did that happen? He goes, oh, about 50 years ago. And I'm like, and you've held it inside yourself for 50 years? Dead weight? You might as well have a backpack full of rocks that you walk around on this planet if you haven't forgiven yourself.
It kind of reminds me a little bit. I'm sure you're familiar of EMDR. I'm sure it's no comparison.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I did EMDR recently over a very traumatic memory of losing my sister when I was 2, and I saw the whole, like, the paramedics and everything. My listeners know this story. Come in, and I couldn't talk about the memory, and now I've done EMDR, so like I can talk about it and not get emotional like I used to. But I realized in all of these years later on the planet, talking through the process of EMDR, that I was blaming myself. So when I was going through the process, the therapist kept asking you the same question and talking about the memory. And then I realized that because my mom, obviously my sister was only 9 months and my mom ran out of the house and it was a whole thing. And I blamed myself for my mom. Like, I had all this guilt that I didn't realize because I witnessed at 2, my mom, having a breakdown over this. So I love the idea, and I know that's different, but I love the idea of like really self-reflecting on things that, you might be holding on to so many years later. It's a great.
Literally, so for some people, it's decades. They had never done that.
Yeah.
They had never done the work. And obviously, I think when we don't forgive ourselves, it impacts our happiness. There's no question about it. But I would recommend to everyone that's listening at this time, if you have not gone through the self-forgiveness process, don't wait anymore. Do not procrastinate your happiness. Don't procrastinate your happiness. So as a result of that, self-care, I think self-forgiveness is the ultimate act of self-compassion, honestly. Like, what a better gift to give to yourself than to forgive yourself for everything that has happened in the past.
Do you find that when you find that when you forgive yourself, then you have an easier
there's no question about it. As a matter of fact, when you show me somebody that's like, man, they never say they're sorry, they never forgive anybody, they're so hard on people. You know what? Those people, when I have them in my office behind closed doors, are the ones that are the hardest and toughest on themselves. Those very people that you think like, man, what a jerk, he never says I'm sorry, whatever. Trust me, they're so hard on themselves. That's why self-forgiveness is important, because once you do that, it directly impacts how you forgive other people too. It's very hard to forgive others if you haven't forgiven yourself.
100%. So what is the next point? Like, and for the sake of time, the most important piece, because I really want people to go out. I'm going to read the book. I really want people. I mean, I have so much work to do in my own life that I don't ever want to preach that, I'm so imperfect.
The other seven paths, of course, is to feed your spiritual self. That's really important, because we are spiritual beings having a physical experience, right? Which for 20, 30, 46 years, 51 or 100, we're spiritual beings. I think knowing your purpose in life and living your purpose, I think that's really impactful. And luckily, I learned that early on in my life, which was I want to make a difference. I want to help people. I want to make this world a better place. So I have lived my purpose for 50 years. And I think happy people, Meghan, also are very kind. I think kindness is a big part of happiness. I think happy people by nature perform acts of kindness, and not random acts. No, deliberate, conscious, and mindful acts of kindness, left and right, because their own batteries are full. Now, having said all that stuff, the other ingredient, let's say you do all of that stuff. You forgive, you practice gratitude, you practice self-care, you're kind, you live your purpose, and so on. But if you surround yourself with toxic people, it's going to rob you of your health and happiness, even if you do all of the above. So one of the 7 paths, the one we haven't talked about, is relationships, and specifically eliminating toxic relationships from your life once and for all. And I actually teach people this is how you eliminate. I don't have any toxic people in my life anymore, Meghan, because I made a deliberate and conscious decision 20 years ago that I'm not going to have that. So I'm going to take you through the process very quickly. It takes less than 5 minutes about how do you eliminate toxic relationships. So let's pretend it's you and I. We have a friendship, right? It always starts with me. In other words, how do I show up in my relationships? So, and Meghan, let me ask you this. Do I treat you with love, kindness, and respect for the most part? Yes or no?
I'm going to say yes.
Okay, assuming, but that's what I'm saying, that we need to show up. We need to treat other people with love, kindness, and respect first before we can talk about toxicity. So assuming the answer is yes, then we have every right to ask for the other person is like, okay, you know what? Then I expect you to treat me with love, kindness, and respect in return. Isn't that fair? And if you don't, then we're going to have an issue. Either we're not going to have any relationship, but oftentimes toxic people are in our family or extended family, so it's very hard to divorce them from that. Or we're going to have a very, very superficial relationship, which means once a year, I'm going to text you Merry Christmas and Happy New Year's and how's the weather in California, and it's going to be a very superficial relationship. I want to have a deeper relationship with you, but not under these conditions. I've treated you with love, kindness, and respect, and you need to do the same. And if you don't, then that's the outcome, and that's my hard boundary. And I'm not messing around either.
But can I ask you a question? Yeah. Sorry to interrupt.
Of course.
So my husband says all the time to me, because again, I'm not saying I'm a saint, but I will say I'm a good friend. Like I've always been a good friend. And where I always end up getting burned is that I expect people to treat me the same way that I treat them, which is exactly what you're talking about with kindness.
Right. Yes.
But I've been told that you can't expect people to treat you the way that you treat them. So is that kind of what you're saying? So if somebody is not treating you the way that you want to be treated, then do you cut them out of your life? Because I still have people in my life that I'm like, you're not treating me the way that I think I should be treated.
No, I give him the option, Meghan. It's not, I don't do anything. I give him the option. Like, in other words, I can't be a jerk and then expect you to treat me with love, kindness, and respect. That's why it always starts with me. But as long as I show up a certain way, which I try to do for the majority of my relationship, then I have every right to say, it's got to be reciprocal that way. And if you're not going to be that way, time out for 6 months. Let's talk in 6 months. Hopefully you'll figure it out by then. In 6 months. Or we have a very superficial relationship. It doesn't cost me anything because it's just through texting. How you doing? How's the weather? Happy birthday. That's it. If that's what you want, that's fine. It doesn't cost me anything. Or I completely cut somebody off from my life. And I've had this happen with a family member who, for the sake of keeping the peace in the extended family, for 20 years, I swallowed a lot. I mean, everybody, honey, just keep the peace. Like, don't bring it up. But he was toxic, sarcastic, and angry, and I was on the receiving end of that many times. And finally, I hit my limit, Meghan, and I took him. We went for a long walk, and I said, "Listen, no more." And you know what he says? This was a brother-in-law. This is really close. It's not some extended family. We're married to sisters. He said to me, "Elia, are you saying I'm the only toxic person in your life?" And I'm like, "Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying." And then he got really quiet for 30 seconds. Nobody said anything. He's looking at me. I'm looking at him. And then he tilted. He said, "You know what? I don't want to be the only toxic person in your life. And I'm like, brother, I don't want you to be that either, but I'm not putting up with your shit anymore. I don't know how else to say it. And to his credit, and he was like 59, like almost 60 years old. To his credit, he changed. And you know why he changed? Because I raised the bar on what I'm willing to accept and not accept behavior-wise. So I'm like, if you want to have a relationship with me, that's how it's got to be. Or else you won't have one. That's it. Was it easy to have that conversation with him? No, of course it wasn't easy. It was like my heart was beating like da 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 da. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary.
Can I ask
because I needed to show up for myself.
If you have a family member, because there's a lot of people I'm sure that are listening that struggle with this, and you found yourself in a toxic relationship, it's okay to walk away, right? Don't you agree? Or tell me about that, because it sounds like he kind of changed and made the changes, but a lot of times people aren't willing to do that. So are you okay with that?
I'm definitely okay walking away because I deserve to be treated with love, kindness, and respect because that's how I treat other people. It's plain and simple, and it's only fair. Actually, when you state it that way, people say, yeah, for the most part, yeah, you're very loving, kind, and respectful towards me. I'm like, okay, then you need to treat me the same way or else. We're not going to have a relationship or a superficial one. Take it or leave it. That's it. Those are my boundaries. I'm sticking to them, and I'm not apologizing for them for wanting somebody else to treat me with love, kindness, and respect. I show up that way. I expect you to do the same. Period.
I think that's huge. I mean, that's so huge in so many people's lives. I think a lot of people live in fear of walking away. And I think it's so much better, even though things like this can be hard, to live an authentic life and right. And just kind of you'll be happier in the long run, I'm guessing.
But Meghan, life is too short. You and I know that. My mom got cancer when she was 39, and my mom was golden. She was love personified. She was all about love, just like your dad. We lost our parents young. It's tragic. It's tragic, but it has also been a gift because I don't take life for granted. And I try to live my best life every single day. I don't procrastinate my happiness. And I try to and walk the talk. Whatever I'm sharing with you today with your audience, I actually do it. I don't just talk about it. I live my life that way. I try to anyway. So there's no room for toxicity in my life. I don't need it. I don't want it, and I'm not having it. I don't know how else to say it.
I love it. I mean, everything you're saying, I think it's all stuff we can all work on. I want to know in closing, because I could talk to you forever, if people want to get your book.
Yes,
Amazon. Where can they find it?
Yeah, both books are on Amazon. 7 Paths to Lasting Happiness and 7 Keys to Navigating a Crisis. And
is there anything that you can tell me or my audience in closing, like one of the most important things that you tell people?
I really do. And I think the pandemic actually helped for me to reach that conclusion it's time. Do not procrastinate your happiness. Live your best life now because there are no guarantees any one of us will be here tomorrow. None. And isn't it, to me, the greatest gift to your dad, Meghan, and the greatest gift to my mom is for me to live a happy life and for you to live a happy life. They're watching us from up there. They're witnessing what we have done with our lives, and they're really proud of us because we've done something good in this world, and we got to continue to do that and to help and inspire other people to live their best lives.
Yeah, we definitely, thank you for saying that. We definitely need more of this right now in these times, for sure. We need to really lean on each other. So if you're listening, I mean, I learned so much from you today, Dr. Elia. It's such an honor to meet you. I cannot wait to meet you in person and learn all about Greece for my trip, my bucket list trip that I'm going to go on. In closing, you matter. Your story matters. Keep going.
Judging Meghan with Meghan Judge.